The more we learn about the water quality in our rivers, lakes, and streams, the more we realize that we need to look beyond the water itself to discover the possible sources of the water quality problems. What are we doing that might damage our water? What are we doing to protect the water from this damage? What are the trade-offs between human needs and water quality? To make any real progress in improving our water, we first need to understand where the problems are actually coming from. Let's take a closer look at the impacts and influences on water quality, because it's our water. In the previous episode, our teams learned how to determine the water quality in their rivers and saw how different man-made water systems work. The mountain team saw how an urban stream can be damaged by runoff from the city. They also visited the water treatment plant to see how river water becomes drinking water. The coastal plains team tested water from the Neuse River and learned how their wastewater treatment facility removes harmful substances from the city's wastewater. The Piedmont team used a macroinvertebrate index to determine the quality of the Eno River near the dam and track down a stormwater system in the city. But do our teams know about the sources of problems that are facing their rivers? Do they know what the biggest water quality problems are in North Carolina?
I think some of the biggest polluters of our water are the hog farms.
It's not just the hog farmers, it's a lot of people in the cities too.
I think factories that just dump out their waste.
Farmers that use the chemical fertilizer.
We found that a lot of the pollutants come from inside of the city itself.
Basically, it's just the people and all the runoff.
Petroleum products that are running off into the rivers.
General urbanization, people trying to build more restaurants, more stores, malls, sidewalks, roads, and highways, making more impervious surfaces.
The biggest polluters, I believe, are the dumpers.
People that destroy the nature around the rivers, that makes the sediment wash into the rivers.
Stuff that gets into storm drains from the rain and everything, and it goes straight into the river, like fertilizer that didn't quite make it on the lawn.
Our teams are aware of some of the potential sources of water quality problems, but how does that damage happen? Let's take a look at some of the common ways that our activities have a negative impact on water quality. Remember the hydrologic cycle? When the surface of the land is in its natural state with trees and vegetation, everything works the way it's supposed to. Water is slowed down and cleaned as it runs over land, through the vegetation, and into the stream. Water soaks into the ground over large areas of land and recharges the groundwater. Any change in that surface begins to change how the water flows and what flows with it. If you cut the trees off the land for the timber, you have a temporary disturbance of this system, which causes faster flow and brings excess sediment into the river until the vegetation grows back. In farming, when a field is cleared and planted every year, sediment, along with fertilizers and pesticides, can run into our waters. Building roads and houses and shopping centers and buildings creates a more continuous and permanent change. All of these man-made structures create impervious surfaces on the land. Impervious surfaces prevent water from soaking into the ground, which causes a larger amount of water to rush into streams at a faster rate. That water is often forced into storm drains that dump water directly into small streams, taking fertilizer from lawns, oil from cars off the streets and parking lots, trash in the gutters, even the tread that's worn off the tires on the highway. It all ends up in our streams, and it gets there fast. That unnatural rush of water also erodes the stream banks and causes even more sediment to be washed into our streams. All this type of pollution is considered runoff or non-point source pollution. The impervious surfaces also rob the groundwater of its share of the water. Water that should be percolating into our aquifers is now rushed into streams in fast bursts that quickly flow away. The water you see in streams and rivers when it's not raining comes from groundwater. So when the rush is over, there's less water in the stream. There are also sources of discharge into our waters that come from an identifiable place, like the discharge of a wastewater treatment facility. We've seen that cities have these facilities, but factories and even animal farms are also required to have ways to treat the waste they generate. The discharge from these facilities is regulated, so it should not be a source of pollution. But if not treated properly, treatment facility discharges can become point source pollution. And the waste that is removed from wastewater doesn't just go away. It has to be put somewhere, and it's often sprayed onto fields as fertilizer. But if too much is sprayed, it can percolate into the groundwater and contaminate the water. Other point sources of pollution can include underground storage tanks and septic tanks. The amount of water that we have to share is also a water quality issue. An upstream dam can change the stream's flow for the rest of the river. A city taking water from one river basin and then returning it into a different river basin is taking water away from the towns downstream. How we use every piece of land can affect the quality of our water, because what's happening on the land affects every raindrop that runs into even the smallest stream. Let's see how our teams determine which land uses and activities are causing the damage to their rivers.
Okay.
Back to the maps. How do you know where to look for potential sources of pollution? Look for someone who has the answers.
The Piedmont team learns about the causes of water quality problems and where to look for them from Cam McNutt of the North Carolina Division of Water Quality.
What we've noticed over the last several years is that the biggest cause of water quality problems in this state is from changing land from one type of land use to a more severe type of land use. Do you know that Durham County is going to increase in population by 88,000 people in the next 15 years? What do you think that means for what's going to happen to the land in this area?
It's going to be urbanized.
It's going to become urbanized. All land uses are shrinking except for urbanization. Right now, as long as the population is increasing in this state, as long as we're urbanizing, we're going to see more water quality problems that aren't related to a big pipe going into the stream. They're related to everything we're doing in our yards, our backyards, every little drop of oil that drips off of our cars. So that sort of material doesn't seem like a big deal until you multiply it by millions of people, and then it becomes a huge water quality problem.
What are some of the land uses upstream from the dam?
Well, if we look at this picture here, it's mostly forest and wetland area upstream of this point on the Eno River where the dam is. With the state park land here, we get a lot of protection of water quality. There is some housing going on, but not a lot. When they run a sewer line out, they can build a lot of houses really close together, and they're now building sewer lines out in this direction. So the potential for a lot of houses to be built in this area is really high. Further up in the watershed, there's some agricultural land up in here that's probably been in different kinds of crops over many, many years. It might be a good idea to go see if there's any active agriculture going on just upstream of the watershed. What's going on right next to the larger river may not be as important as what's happening further in the watershed on some of the smaller streams. So if you look at your map, you'll find these smaller streams, and there'll be lots of them. What's happening in these smaller streams might have a lot more impacts on what's happening near the dam than what's happening in the main part of the river.
The Piedmont team looks upstream for possible impacts on water quality. There they meet homeowners Lisa and Bob Bachman and ask them about their thoughts on the dam removal.
What do you enjoy about the dam being downstream?
Canoeing is one of the big activities we have out here, and fishing, and we swim in the river too.
So if the dam were removed, how would it affect you?
We don't know what the impact is going to be, and that's really the hardest part.
Right now the river's probably, 10 to 12 feet deep here, but with the dam down, we're expecting ankle deep water. The other side of the river is state park land. We have people that hike over there. The deep river acts as a buffer. They can't cross and come over to our land. With the river ankle deep, we're afraid we're going to have people just walking both sides of the river. We really don't want that. If the river were to stay as it is, that's basically what we're hoping for, but we don't see much hope for that.
Further upstream along the river, the Piedmont team finds Ted Williams on his farm.
So I've been here quite a long time, since I was probably 10 years old. And before we came here, there was a tobacco farm here, actually. We've turned the farm now into having a few goats and some cows. The river's right beyond these trees here. Would y'all like to go down and see this?
Sure.
Let's go for a ride. It helps me to have this river because I can have the cows in this pasture and they can't get across the river. It's like a fence. All right, we're here. Once we remove this dam and the water goes down, they could walk across.
Right.
If I put a fence out here on the bank, the first storm that comes, the trees probably just wipe out this fence every time. If I go further up, and that would be not very much pasture for them. So probably would not be able to have cows in this area.
Right. How is the water quality around here?
It's certainly better quality now than it was years ago because the dyes that were in Hillsborough were put into the river. We would see one day the river would have a streak of green in the middle, next day it would be blue, depending on which dye they dumped in that week.
So you want the dam to stay?
I think I'd like to see the dam stay.
Development, industry, and agriculture, they all have the potential to harm the water. But we all need a place to live, a job, food to eat, and clean water.
The Coastal Plains team looks into some of the potential sources of water pollution in their area to see what people are doing to help minimize those impacts. First, they meet Chuck Tyson with Tyson Realty at a new housing development.
The concept behind this beautiful subdivision was to keep as much stormwater runoff from getting to our rivers and streams as possible. And we're very concerned about taking care of our rivers. We feel like they're our biggest asset. All the runoff from the housing development and from the streets run down to the gutter. The gutters then are channeled to 2 9-acre lakes that were dug. So no stormwater runoff goes off this property. Everything that is started here ends here. In fact, we even go one step further. We then take the water from the lake and pump it back out and use it for irrigation on the grass out here. So that way we're not also taking water from the aquifers to water the grass.
Is it any more expensive to run the stormwater to a lake versus running it straight to a creek?
It is more expensive, but if you just run it into the catch basin and then straight out into the creek, all that pollution is going into the creeks. The lakes are very pretty, they have a lot of wildlife, they're full of fish, they have geese coming in and landing. People like living on the lakes because it's very scenic and beautiful. So we accomplished 2 goals at one time. We made the property more marketable. At the same time, we feel like we did a good job of doing the very best we could to protect the environment. We have to have housing for the people moving here, but at the same time, we've got to protect our most valuable asset, our rivers and streams.
Next, the Coastal Plains team visits the plant of a local industry, Weyerhaeuser, and talks to David Gardner, the environmental manager for the pulp processing plant.
We draw in all of our processed water from the Neuse River. New Bern kind of being the end of the Neuse River to some degree. It's not exactly pristine water when we get it, so there's some stuff that we have to do to it before we can even begin to use it. The state of North Carolina has issued us a wastewater permit. It's called an NPDES permit. It's the National Pollution Discharge Elimination Systems. We report to them every month. We drew it in from the Neuse. We've used it for our process. We've treated it. We've reported the values that we treat. We discharge it back to the Neuse River, and it flows downstream to the city of New Bern and on down. Our waste treatment system is very large and is very dynamic. It contains 100 acres for just treatment. So when you look at our whole plant site being maybe 300 acres, 350 acres, we're dedicating a good bit of that just to wastewater treatment. We have this practice in place that's called best management practices. And that's regulatory driven. We didn't exactly volunteer for it, but it has been a wonderful, wonderful thing. Over the last 10 or 15 years, we have reduced water usage at our facility by 40 or more %. And our BOD removal efficiency is around 94%, which is really, really good for wastewater treatment systems. So it's no small effort that we put into being sure that our water is returned back to the Neuse River in a good state that'll meet the state requirements.
Last, the Coastal Plains team visits a hog farm and talks to George Pettis, the environmental manager for Goldsboro Hog Farms.
What do you guys do on the farm with these pigs?
This facility is a finishing facility. They come in here at 50 to 55 pounds, and then they'll leave here and they'll actually go to the packer, where they'll end up on your table and mine. There's pork chops and sausage.
So how do you protect the water quality?
We use a total recycle system here. Let's go. If you look under the slats, you can see water under the slats. And that stays in here all the time. So all of the waste is going down between the slats into that water. And then every 3 to 5 days, we'll pull a plug. It'll totally empty the building of all the waste and the water drains into the lagoon. This is where all of the waste from the buildings and from the hogs comes. And the lagoon is actually a treatment process. There are microbials in the lagoon that are breaking down those solids. We use that as an organic fertilizer to grow our hay crop. We also pull water from the lagoon. It's recycled through the buildings, so we're not using fresh water, and that's a reduction on the amount of water being utilized as well. So everything is totally recycled and reused back between the buildings and the lagoon. One of the things that we do as far as reducing water, we use hanging waters, which has reduced the amount of water going into the lagoon by about 15%. Why is that important? Because the amount of water we're putting into our lagoon is the amount of water that has to come out of the lagoon. So if we can reduce that water, then that's a reduction in the water that we're actually land applying. So it's not only a concern about how we're impacting water quality, but it's also a concern about the amount of water that we're using. So it's twofold.
Follow the river to its source. Join your fellow citizens who are cleaning up our rivers. Today is Big Sweep.
The mountain team joins other volunteers for a fall cleanup of the French Broad River, led by David Whitmire of the Headwaters Outfitters in Rosamond.
We want to welcome everybody to the fall 2003 French Broad River cleanup. By the way, for you folks that don't know it, this is actually the beginning of the French Broad River right under the bridge here. The North and West Fork comes together to start the very beginning of the French Broad. Has anybody not been on a river cleanup with us? Well, we got a lot of first-timers this year. We're going to be floating down, picking up incidental trash. You'll find cans, things that comes out of car windows and ditches and floats down. That's what we'll be picking up. You'll also find some stuff that's been there for years and years. We've found cars, we've found stoves, refrigerators. You'll be amazed what we've found over the years.
Which way are you going to paddle?
When you do a canoe trip, you want to have a nice natural trip, not to be going down with a bunch of trash. A lot of the trash that you probably saw today coming down the river is from roadside trash, things that wash down ditches. And you know, even though you may live 3 miles upstream, the water that goes by your house goes to the river. You guys get a lot of trash out today?
Actually, it's pretty clean.
Since we started outfitting the first 20 miles of the French Broad, we wanted to get it, much cleaner. The fall cleanup is very neat because it corresponds with the North Carolina statewide river cleanup. Well, it's great to see all the volunteers come out because it is hard work, but it is a lot of fun. If just one person was doing all this, it'd be quite a job, but you get, 30, 40 people out here, and the job becomes a lot easier.
What are your biggest concerns about the French Broad at this point?
Your water is very clean up here in the headwaters. Our biggest polluter that we have in the headwaters is actually siltation. After the heavy rains, we get a good bit of silt that flows from roads and construction and development up in the mountains. And you have the banks caving off, and it causes a great deal of stream bank erosion. That's our two biggest concerns up in this area.
Thank you for talking.
At the end of day 4, our teams have made a good start on looking for the sources of water quality problems in their rivers. The Piedmont team learned how population growth changes land use and where to look for sources of water quality problems. The Coastal Plains team talked to people who work in businesses that have regulated point sources of discharge. They learned what those businesses are doing to try to protect the water. The mountain team saw just how much trash gets into the river by helping clean it up. All our teams have gathered a lot of information about water quality in their rivers. Now they need to look closely at their water quality issues.
Hi. How'd it go today?
Good.
Awesome. Great. Learn a lot?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, this is something to think about.
Okay. You've seen what's getting into the headwaters of the French Broad.
You've seen how some of the potential polluters of the river are working to keep the water clean. Is it enough? What else can we do?
Next, the biggest challenge of all. What do you think?
Soon it will be your decision.
I guess we're gonna have to put everything together that we learned.
Let's do it, guys. Go Team Purple. I think the water quality may not be as bad as it was because we are starting to recognize, and our wastewater treatment plants have done a lot but it's still bad.
I think it's kind of at a standstill. I don't think the water quality is getting better or worse.
I think it's getting a little bit better.
We need research to find out what the other problems are so we can fix them.
What other sources are polluting our water, you know, and also make sure that these sources, if they're people or whatever they are, that they know that they're doing this.
I think the water quality is getting better because people are starting to take action about it.
I believe that we need to do more because there are still, as we saw with the water quality samples, still a lot of pollutants and runoff that run into the streams.
I don't think you should ever stop trying to help a cause just because it's at a good spot and make it the best it can be, not good.
I think it's probably worse because a lot of people don't necessarily follow the regulations.
The water quality is getting worse because they say don't pollute, but people still pollute. They say don't over-fertilize your lawns, but they still do it. The pollution's winning over the regulations.
I think right now it's at a turning point. I know there's more urbanization and everything now, but I think more people realize what's going on, and that if we don't take care of this, we're going to be in a bad rut.
This is a section of the video where they hope we trip and fall so they can put it in the bloopers.
Oh my God. She's like a monkey or something up there.
Waco's nuts, Matt.
My hero. I'm coming right towards you.
Take it. No.
You stuck?
Oh, it feels weird. No, backpedal, not forward.
3, 2,
Actually, yes.
1. No, what am I asking?
How are they going to contain the water?
Oh, okay. Okay.